So the Hanzo rework popped up just a little while ago, and I hear a lot of people already complaining, this rework is completely broken, way too OP, nerf every single part of it. And before we really get to that, I actually want to talk about the rework itself, and I guess also talk about why we shouldn't go about nerfing everything before we really have too much time to see what it does. Now overall with Hanzo's rework, I think it is in a good direction. They essentially made so that his kit still does rely a lot on picks and still can get a lot of those, but they added a lot more consistency, and they essentially decreased the downtime of Hanzo, because beforehand, you'd use your abilities, you'd wait a while and be pretty useless, but now he can do stuff more often, more consistently, but I guess his pop-off moments are definitely a little bit worse. Overall, probably more fun to play against, probably in some situations more fun to play as, and I think overall it is a good rework. But I guess the question here is, will Hanzo create a new meta with this rework? And I guess my initial thing that I'm going to say here is, no, I do not think the Hanzo's going to make a brand new meta, and I don't think that he's some ridiculously overpowered character. I think that in general, the way I'm going to put it right here is that, at least in Overwatch competitive solo queue, maybe in esports will be different, but at least in solo queue, I think he's going to be a lot like Tracer and Genji, where he's always a strong meta pick, and can always do pretty well, at least when he's released, if you are good with them, and if you can play him really well. And even if you're okay with him, you're probably going to do okay, as with Genji and Tracer, but especially those players that are extremely good with him and that put in a ton of time with him, they're really going to prosper the most. And I think the problem about those type of characters and the meta is that not everybody's going to be able to pick up and play them, and with Hanzo, I think it's like that. Not everyone's going to be able to pick up and play Hanzo really well. Sure, a lot of people will be able to play him well enough and probably stay at their current rank, but again, I think that the way his kit is designed and the way that it really relies on mechanical aim and mechanical skill like that, I think, again, he's not going to be some guy that just shows up and just whomps every single meta for the next 5 years. I think he is going to overall be in a pretty good spot if you are good with him, and a pretty okay spot if you are okay with him. Again, like those other two characters. Now, back to his consistency, I think this is one of the main things about him that's going to make him better, but not really overpowered, because they are making him more consistent overall. He does have his Sonic Arrow up more, he can now shoot 6 shots relatively consistently, they are pretty straight, they charge instantly, all of that. But what they reduced from his kit was the amount of burst, and just from the scatter arrow. I guess they kind of reduced the amount of burst impact of a Sonic Arrow because it has a smaller radius, so you could kind of count that as burst also. But in general, they reduced the burst of his scatter arrow, and I think that's a good idea because that wasn't fun to play against. But getting rid of burst from certain characters can, in a lot of cases, actually kind of hurt their kits. I think one really good example is playing Hanzo against Winston, where I think he's still going to do pretty well, especially in a 1v1. You're still going to be able to, maybe outplay him depending on how he uses his shield. But I think if you're, let's say right here, playing Hanzo versus a Winston that is also getting healed, it's going to be very hard for you to ever really kill him now, because beforehand you could headshot him and then go for a scatter arrow and pretty much insta-kill him even if he was getting mercy heals, and sometimes even with Moira heals. But now, since your damage isn't a instant burst, it means that the enemy that you're shooting at will start healing up HP while you're shooting at them with all your arrows, because it takes around 2 seconds to get all those arrows out. They're going to have like 60 to 100 HP being healed up on them, and as you can see, it'll be harder for you in some cases to kill people just because you don't do as much burst, honestly. But again, I think that's actually an alright thing, because it really makes so that playing against Hanzo feels a lot more fair, and playing as Hanzo, well, you kind of have to think about where you're positioning more, you have to really think about when you want to use your abilities more, and not just go for these AP one-shots out of nowhere. You really do have to kind of figure stuff out a lot more, and I really do think that's good. But as well, you do have to remember this consistency is also a great addition to his kit, because making these 6 arrows that do 80 damage, that shoot instantly, that can still headshot, essentially mean that Hanzo, when he does have this ability up, will be able to do consistent damage to multiple targets in a team fight, and won't just have to kill one person and then hope that he gets a random lucky headshot with his regular bow. And I think by doing that, he's gonna, in most situations, be actually a little bit better. But as well, you just remember, in certain situations, he might be a little bit worse because of the lack of burst. So by putting those together, I think it was a good shift in the way that they made his kit change. But what I'm trying to come to here is that I don't think that he's going to be overpowered, because adding consistency, while sometimes to a certain extent can be a little bit too overpowered, I think in this certain situation it really isn't. And if his arrows do become a bit too overpowered, they can easily just nerf the damage from like 80 to 75 and then like 75 to 70, whatever they really need to. I think this is a very balanceable ability, especially compared to Scatter Arrow, so I'm pretty happy about that. Another thing I should say right here though is that as Hanzo now, you can't really randomly one-shot heroes like Reaper anymore or like Mei, so that kind of does hurt him in some situations, and you can't randomly blow up a tank. So I think there is going to be, again, more outplay potential against Hanzo, but I guess when you are playing as Hanzo, a lot of the situations will just be fun to go through. And mainly, I think in general, his kit is going to be more powerful, but have less really annoying moments to play against. And I think that by changing it like that, I don't think he's really going to completely destroy the meta. If, for example, they made so that his Scatter Arrow had like half the cooldown, that probably could destroy the meta. But by changing it so much and just making it a consistent ability, I don't really think that's going to be happening way too much. Now, going back to Hanzo, I'm going to talk about where I think he fits right here. And, you know, if he does become meta, these are the characters I think are going to kind of play around him a lot. First off, I think he's going to work really well with Mercy, because the damage boost. If you damage boost Hanzo with his 6 arrows, he can shred through tanks so fast. And even against Orisa, if you use your arrows and you can somehow get past her barrier, which won't always happen, but if you can do that, I mean, if you get all headshots and she uses her Fortify, she's going to die anyways. But if you add on to that, the Mercy damage boosting the Hanzo, he's going to do really well against tanks in situations where he can get to them. So I think that's a really cool part about him. And I'm kind of questioning where he's going to play, because he actually does really well against tanks when right next to them, but at the same time, I mean, you don't want to always use your mobility to just run away from them after spamming at their face, and a lot of the times you want to be pretty far away because, you know, he's a sniper. That might be kind of hard to get used to. But yeah, I think with Mercy, being able to do all that extra damage with his ability is very strong, and in addition to that, I think he's going to be working well with Zenyatta. Not just because Zenyatta is just great right now overall, but because they both can supply a lot of picks to their team. Just before a fight, you can wait for one of them to get a pick, and then they can go in together. But as well because, again, the Zenyatta can discord one of the enemy tanks, Hanzo can shoot at them, get some body shots, get some headshots, and you can push through really quickly, especially against someone like Reinhardt or, again, someone like Orisa, and I think those two together will do great. Overall, I think damage boost will really help his kit, and I think that's where we're going to be seeing him a decent amount. Now, as far as tanks go, I could see him working pretty well with Rein Zarya, because his ultimate combos really well with their ultimates, and just overall his kit kind of works with their ultimates. I think that's going to be fine, but I think we're going to see him more often with Orisa Hog, kind of more spam compy. If he gets dived on, well, you're going to have some people that can somewhat peel for you, that being the Orisa and the Hog, and then, you know, someone like Amora giving a lot of heals, and I think that, you know, is probably going to be kind of where you play him, because in general, he's going to still be a little bit more spammy, but I guess a little bit less, one-shotty, if you want to call it that. Overall, though, I'm going to say that I don't think Hanzo in any meta is going to be way too team comp dependent. I think mainly he's going to just kind of have to switch if the enemy team comp is very good versus him. I think especially with characters like D.Va, it can be kind of hard to play him now, because you can't just randomly one-shot her and almost kill her mech by yourself. It does take a little while to get through to her, and if she sees that you happen to pop your E, or whatever it's called, the storm arrows now, then she can just fly away, then she can get some help, then she can just stop you from shooting her for 2 seconds from the Matrix. I think that might be kind of hard to play against her, and against other certain comps it might be kind of hard, but as far as playing with certain comps, I think you really can play him with just most comps that'll work pretty well. Now, against most DPS, I want to mention this, I think he will also generally work a little better now versus most DPS, because his regular fire will hit them more often, because he is more accurate now, and his arrow does move. You know, it used to be 85, but now it's 100, so it's a little faster, so that is a little easier to hit. As well, now he can scan a lot more often for flankers and around corners to see where people are, so that'll be nice. But I do think it might be kind of hard for him in one sense, because he can't scatter arrow and just one-shot DPS anymore around corners, so, I mean, that is one negative about this rework, obviously. But I think that the fact that he does have the storm arrows that will make so he's a lot more consistent at close range versus other DPS will definitely make up for that, especially if you become very good at hitting a lot of shots. And I've been hearing a lot of people playing Hanzo on the PTR saying they really like playing him a lot more versus flankers now, because beforehand, while they could one-shot a Tracer all the time, or could one-shot a Genji, it just feels a lot better to one-shot them now. I guess not even one-shot, it feels a lot better to just shoot them multiple times now, and try to hit all those shots instead of just hitting the singular scatter arrow. And that's in general how his kit, I guess, kind of feels. Now, one comp that I did want to mention that I didn't talk about earlier that's going to be hard for you to play versus, in my opinion, is going to be playing versus dive comp, because you can't just one-shot the divers anymore. You can't just one-shot the Winston that jumps on you, and you couldn't always do that anyways, but I mean, you kind of had the potential with the scatter arrow. Now you can't really do that, and unless you have a lot of people peeling for you, I think it's going to be pretty hard, because even though you do have that lunge now to get away from the dive, I mean, if they just dive kind of behind you, or, you know, where your escape would normally be, that lunge isn't going to help way too much. It isn't the most mobility in the entire game. So I do think that might be kind of difficult to go versus, and if people are playing a very good dive versus you, you might have to switch it up maybe to someone like Reaper, or maybe to someone, I don't know, like Tracer, some other dive characters. In general, I think it is, again, going to be pretty good, and in competitive solo queue, dive isn't that great anyways, because people can't usually pull it off. But do keep that in mind. I think dive is going to somewhat shut him down, and that's one of the main reasons, again, why I don't think it's going to be too overpowered. I mean, if it was always slow push comp versus slow push comp, maybe Hanzo could be seen as really good right now, but with a lot of dive, again, I think that might hold him back just a little bit. And the final thing I think holding him back is going to be his ultimate, and the fact that his general kit is still a pretty pick-based kit. He still does need headshots from far range. He still does need to hit some of those shots that are hard to get. He still does get hurt a lot from barriers. He still is kind of hard to play because he is still going to be pretty situational. And I think that's overall what's going to be kind of holding him down, just because the way that his projectile works and the way that his kit is just designed isn't really one of those kits that I think is going to be just like great all the time. I guess we were still thinking the same exact thing with, you know, Junkrat though, so maybe I'll be wrong here, but I think he's going to be, again, stronger, more consistent, but not completely overpowered. I mean, if they completely changed the way his ultimate worked and made that way better, and maybe made so that his primary fire could shoot like 3 shots at a time and some other crap like that, maybe he would be in an overpowered state. But I think as it is right now, he's going to be in a good state, a fun state to play with, kind of a fun state to play versus, honestly. And overall, again, yeah, I don't think he's going to be too overpowered, but I do think he might be good enough to become meta, but not good enough to engulf the entire meta by himself like Mercy was. So there you go, guys. That's all my opinions about the Hanzo rework. Overall, again, I think it was a really good rework. I think it changed up his kit in a great way. I wish that they could have maybe got rid of the one-shot potential with his regular primary fire, but that would just make his kit not that great at all. I don't know, it's just kind of annoying to play versus that in general from a gameplay standpoint, but again, I don't know how you fix that without making him terrible, so, you know, that's one of those things that they just can't fix, because that's the way his character works. But that, I guess, is one thing I wish that they could have somehow found a way around. But anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below what you think about the Hanzo rework, and if you think he's going to be really good, or if you think he's just going to be a little bit better than it was before. I hope he does get at least above a 50% win rate, and hopefully maybe even like a 52 or 53. They can tone him down a little bit, and keep him about mid-tier forever. Let's hope. Because he has been bad for a while, but I would really like to see him doing pretty well. Anyways, as always, guys, though, thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful day.